For those who don't know who I am, my name is Bob Flood. I'm here to tell you today about how your tax dollars have been wasted in the village of Pawling. This story will also go to many agencies that are supposed to investigate the crime that happened here and the violation of my civil rights. It will first go to Dutchess County Sheriff Department and to the Dutchess County District Attorney. It will also go to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Fareed Bahar. I've also had problems trying to get this story out to the press. A lot of don't want to cover it. But last week I spoke to a woman from the Poughkeepsie Journal. Her name is Sarah Bradshaw. She's an investigative reporter, and she's intrigued by this story. This will also be put up on a Facebook page with a link to a petition so you can sign it and let people know that you think this deserves an investigation. I was served on May 14th, 2007 to appear in New York State Supreme Court to answer for building violations. Building violations are normally heard in justice court. So I was a bit surprised that I'm being dragged to Supreme Court. The complaint states that I had a permit for a new roof on my house, but that permit did not cover these 4 violations: a new electric service, replacement windows, plywood, and sheetrock. Now, I answered this complaint as best I could in a letter, telling the building department, the mayor, and the attorneys involved that you go to justice court first before you go to Supreme Court. It even states this in their building code, which is part of the paperwork, and explained how these were not violations. Everything was done on the up and up. First, there was no replacement windows. The plywood was on the roof that I had a permit for. You don't need a permit for sheetrock. That's finished work. And a new electric service was done by a licensed electrician, and it was inspected by a licensed inspector, and they had a certificate in the office at the time they were suing me. I answered this complaint, and I wanted just to have the building inspector and I sit down and discuss this and find out what was going on here. I learned a couple weeks later that that building inspector had quit. Now the town wanted, or the village rather, wanted to come inside my house and look for other violations. On principle, I refused. Something was wrong here. I didn't know what, but I didn't know why they were doing this. I learned much later that the village had changed their code. The only 2 changes in the code were the fact it gives them the right to go to Supreme Court first before going to local court, and it doubles the fines to a $200 or $450 a day. It doesn't make any of this illegal that I did. The only problem with this new law was it wasn't filed with the state to become law until 2 months after I was served the papers to go to Supreme Court. Now, no one would sit down and talk to me about these violations. Our first appearance in court was 2008, August. The first thing the judge said was, "Why isn't this some kind of justice court where it belonged?" The village attorney said that it was in Supreme Court because the local court couldn't grant what they were asking for, and that was a permanent injunction for me to never work on this house again, and removal of the alleged violations. Well, a permanent injunction is a little bit ridiculous. I can see a temporary injunction until the case is heard, but a permanent injunction for repairs to a house is absurd. In removal of the violations, this wasn't a toxic waste dump. This was repairs to an existing old home. Now, I explained away these violations to the judge, and I thought this case would have gone away, but it didn't. Several months later, the judge gave these guys access to the interior of my home. Basically, it was a search warrant. Now, this inspection was on January 31st, 2009. The inspection was done by Larry Tomaso, Carl Pfister, both building inspectors, and they were accompanied by a Dutchess County Sheriff, Price. Larry Tomaso made a report of the violations that he found. Now, the first thing he did is dismiss all the previous violations, every one of them, but he came up with 12 more. This is the list of violations. Change of occupancy. The house is currently a vacant two-family dwelling. It's being converted into a one-family dwelling. A bath alteration is in progress on the first floor. A kitchen is in progress on the first floor. Bedroom alterations are in progress on the second story. A bath alteration is in progress on the second story. Second story kitchen was removed and will be converted to a bedroom. The old furnace was removed. 2 oil tanks are in process of being removed or abandoned in the basement. A new heating system is in process of being installed. A new load-bearing center beam was installed in the basement. The front porch is being renovated with new footings. A new roof. All this is just ridiculous. I don't care what permit you're looking at, both of them, or what building code. They both say all this is legal to do without a permit. I had a permit for the roof, but now they're going back and saying that the roof permit was never actually legal because I didn't give them enough money. But nobody ever sent me a letter saying, come in and give them more money. The new footings they talk about, during the inspection, they took pictures of these footings. They're old. They're older than I am. And they even admit that now. The village amended this complaint to include these new violations. And of course, I argued it. Several times I asked the judge, Christine Sproat, to send this case back to the village court where we can have a informal hearing on this, the way it's usually done. She refused to do this for me. So I asked her in April of 2009, if that's not what you're going to do, then at least let's have an evidentiary hearing before we go to a trial. Let's have the building inspector show up and we can go over these building violations one by one and find out what's actually a violation and what isn't, because I know they're not violations. She granted this hearing for May 21st. I show up at that hearing. There's no building inspector. There's no attorney. I was dragged to the side by the court clerk, Mike Engel, who was the clerk at the time, and told me that the hearing had been canceled because the plaintiff was going to make a motion and didn't know what it was going to be. I later found out that the motion was for a summary judgment, and that's where the judge just looks at the paperwork and rules on the case rather than have testimony. Well, I argued that, and I also found out that at the same time, another building inspector, Larry Tomaso, the one that wrote the report, has now quit. So he can't be made available. At the same time all this is going on, a board member, Colette Zito, who is running against the current mayor for his job, she was intrigued by this case. She knew it was garbage. She toured my house and knew it was all phony. She was calling the court. She was calling the lawyers, trying to figure out why this was in Supreme Court and wasting all this money. She eventually had a meeting with the village attorney, Michael Hayes, and that's the last I heard from her. Whatever they told her, she quieted down real quick. Now, the next time we speak is October 5th, 2009, when we had a hearing on this summary judgment pretrial conference. At this conference, I argued the fact that I had a permit at the time for everything I needed, and that was only the roof. Michael Hayes, now after all this hoopla over not paying enough money for that roof permit, now admits that I did, in fact, have a valid roof permit. Now the judge is asking me why I'm being so difficult. Why don't you just go get a permit? The building permit, if I got one, it's a guilty plea. No matter what I say afterwards, I'm pleading guilty to something I never did, and that's never going to happen. But the judge is pushing for it. The last thing the judge told me was, you either get a building permit or I'm going to find in their favor. In other words, plead guilty or I'll find you guilty. An hour later, I met with the building inspector, Carl Pfister, and Colette Zito in his office. In 10 minutes, we wiped out 10 of the violations, everything but the roof. And nobody thought to mention that Michael Hayes just dismissed the roof in court. But Michael Hayes, Colette Zito, and Carl Pfister all refused to contact the judge and let her know that these had been dismissed. And they never gave me a report on it. But I wrote a letter to the judge letting her know what had transpired at that meeting. When she got that letter, she found me guilty. I was not at all happy with being found guilty without a trial. So I filed a notice of appeal. But I had fought this case myself without an attorney. And I was tired of doing that, and the appeals process is very difficult, to say the least. So what I did is decided the best thing, the way to get to this fraud, expose these people, is to call their bluff. In June of 2010, I contacted the building inspector, Carl Pfister, and told him I wanted to abate the violations, but you got to come over and show me what you want removed. He refused to do so. Larry Tommaso quit as building inspector in May when I asked for this evidentiary hearing. Now, when they spent the $12,000 for his summary judgment, they had drafted 2 affidavits for both building inspectors to sign in support of this motion. Larry Tommaso had been gone for 3 months. They went to him to have this signed. Carl Pfister refused to sign it because he knew it was all false. On December 1st, after reading my letter, the judge found me guilty of building violations with no trial, no testimony, nothing. Just the word of 2 people that refused to go to court and quit before they were made to go to court. I wasn't happy with this decision, of course, so I filed a notice of appeal. Now that gives you 6 months to perfect an appeal, but that's a long and difficult thing to do, and it wasn't for me. So the easiest way to expose this was to do what they wanted. Tell them I want to remove everything because there's nothing there to remove. These are all empty rooms. So in June, I talked to Carl Pfister and told him what my plans were. And he had to come over and physically show me what to remove. He refused to do this. So I told him, well, I'm going back to work in the house then. So in July, I started putting shingles on my house. Nothing more, just shingles. The very day that I started this, because I let him know when I was going to start, he was at my house within a half an hour with a stop work order. 1 week later, he comes back and tells me that he's done with this. This wasn't his problem. He didn't make that list, and he wants nothing more to do with this case. Whatever happens between me and the village is up to me and them, and he wants nothing more to do with it. Fine. I kept on working my house. The next thing you know, I'm being served papers to appear in the same court for contempt for not completing the judge's order of removing all these violations before going back to work in my house again. Our first contempt hearing was December 5th, 2010. At this hearing, the judge told me that she could put me in jail for this. She did not appoint me an attorney to defend me. Now, I told her that I'd be happy to comply with her order, but someone's got to show me how to remove something that's not there. This led to another inspection. This time it was just Carl Pfister. Carl Pfister came to my house December 13th, just a few days later, and he never looked at anything in the house. He never moved from the front table. He dismissed every violation. Because he was being taped, both video and audio, he realized it's time to pony up, and this time he put it all in writing. Not only did he admit that he dismisses these violations, he also admits that he dismissed them with Colette Zito back in October of 2009, before the judge made her decision in this case. Now, we had 3 more appearances in court for this contempt. It was all just threats. Every time I'd go there, if you don't sign this permit, you're going to jail. We even had a hearing in October, on October 3rd, 2010, to schedule a hearing for November 3rd, 2010. That's how ridiculous this case has been. So November 3rd comes around, I show up, Carl Fisher shows up. After he has dismissed all the violations, he now testifies for me to go to jail. The next thing you know, I got the court officers picking me up out of my chair and handcuffing me. An hour later, I'm sitting in Dutchess County Jail on a 30-day sentence. When I got in there, the guards were all laughing, asking who the hell is here for a building permit. What happened to me in jail over that 30 days is a story for another day. What's interesting is what happened with the court while I was in jail. On November 14th, my cell door pops open when I was supposed to be locked in. So I asked the guard what he wanted, and the guard told me, well, you have to go to court. Even though I had a sentence, 30 days, they want me in court. The judge had sent the building permit to the jail where I could get out at any time I wanted by signing that permit. I refuse to do it. I will do my time. I will not plead guilty to something I didn't do. Well, a week later, the village attorneys are scrambling, calling the judge, trying to figure out how to get me back into court. When I get to court, the judge tells me that I have to sign the building permit because the village has to end this case. I told the judge, we'll end this case when I get out of jail. Not until then, and I will not sign a building permit. So she asked me if I want an attorney, which is funny because she doesn't give me an attorney before she puts me in jail. Now she's going to appoint me an attorney. I agreed. They put me back in the cells behind the courthouse. A half an hour later, somebody shows up and tells me he's an appointed attorney, and he's gone over everything in 20 minutes. And he advises that I sign the permit. I told him no way it was going to happen. So the judge is not happy now. She tells me back in jail. Now, upon getting out of jail December 2nd, I find out that the hearing for November 14th isn't listed on the website. It's just not there. But it says a hearing for December 9th. When I see this December 9th down there, I emailed the attorney and asked him what's going on with this. And he told me that, well, that's a hearing for calendar control. You don't have to be there. I'm not going. Don't worry about it. Well, I'm looking at it, and I said, it says it's already been held. I asked him about that. He didn't answer me. So I ordered the transcripts for the November 14th hearing. And the judge in this, now she says in the transcripts, it says that she brought me back to court because she was concerned about myself and my family. If she was so concerned about my family, she would have thrown this out of her court and got rid of it. Now, I had also called her clerk, and I asked her why that the November 14th hearing was not listed on the website. And she told me, well, it must be a glitch. I asked her about the December 9th hearing that never happened, that says already been heard. And she said, well, I shouldn't be there. That's their explanation. That's all there is to it. A month later, a couple weeks later, I meet with attorney Michael Hayes again and the building inspector, and they again want me to sign a permit. I refuse. I find out that the attorney, who was a partner in this law firm, Danielson Porco, and he was their trial attorney, did all their heavy trial work, has now resigned, and now he's working for a judge in Poughkeepsie as a court clerk. That's not a step up. That seems like going down to me. So there's another. I can only assume that the reason that he's gone is because he screwed up and didn't get the job done. Before we finish here today, I want to revisit a couple of things and get into them a little bit more. The summary judgment that the judge gave. I Googled it, and a summary judgment is only given when both sides of the party, both parties, have agreed to the underlying facts of the case. This had never happened here. I never admitted to building violations, and I've been screaming it's a fraud from word go. So I believe the judge was wrong in granting that. I had, a year ago or so, I made a motion for the judge to overturn her own decision based on fraud. But I did it with an order to show cause, and she has to sign that. She refused to. Now, with what you're seeing here, what I have, I've got tapes you're going to hear shortly. They will be transcripts in this order to show cause, and I've got overwhelming evidence that it was a fraud, and we'll see where she stands this time around. The November 14th hearing that we had, that's not listed on the website, the judge granted me an attorney. Why she didn't grant me an attorney before she put me in jail, only she can answer that. But this day she gave me an attorney. I found out his name is Paul Tagarone. In the files in Poughkeepsie, there's a letter there where she had issued him as my attorney. He's been appointed and everything. But if you look at the transcripts from November 14th, you don't hear his name mentioned at all. You don't hear him say anything, even though he was present at this hearing. The reason is this guy doesn't want his name anywhere near this. That's, a lot of people are just running for the hills. I have also called the court clerk and asked her about this December 9th hearing that never existed. You'll hear the tape and her explanation of why that was down there. Now on to complaints. I've told you in the past I have made complaints to the Dutchess County Sheriffs, to the Dutchess County District Attorneys, and many, many others. And everybody who's just washed their hands of me, they turned me away. No, we don't handle that, this and that. Well, the reporter I told you about, Sarah Bradshaw, she's been doing a story about elections commissioners in Dutchess County and a lawsuit that's going on. Well, somebody involved in this lawsuit called the district attorney, and the district attorney investigated, got a grand jury together, and he indicted 2 of these people. One of them, David Gamache, is from the village of Pawling, no surprise. But what they're indicted for is making false statements and filing false paperwork, false reports. This is exactly what these people did to me. Now, why do I not get an investigation? Why are these people not brought up on charges? Now, the reason there's so much paperwork in Poughkeepsie is the judge gave these people everything they asked for. I asked for 3 things. I asked for an evidentiary hearing, get in there, let's get this on a table and just explain it away. That was denied. If that wasn't going to happen, I demanded a trial. She took care of that with that summary judgment, but we can see that's not the way it was supposed to be used. Now, if we had a trial in the Supreme Court, it would have cost less than the $12,000 paid for that summary judgment. But they also had the ability to go back to local court and have a hearing there. It took her 2 months to make her decision. So she could have waited for a couple weeks for us to go to local court, but she did not do this. And last, now we'll give it a break, and then, and the last thing is, all this information is going to go to this woman, Sarah Bradshaw, and there's a couple others I've been speaking to. She's the reporter from the Poughkeepsie Journal. She is going to investigate this, I'm sure, when she sees all the evidence. And hopefully she's going to contact the judge and find out what was on her mind, and contact the district attorney and find out why he hasn't made a move towards any investigation into this fraud.
Good morning, Judge Bothart.
Yes, this is Bob Flood. I'm a litigant in Judge Sproat's court.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, do I need a hearing or whatever to get in there and so we can close this case?
Do you have an index number?
707 2007.
Oh, wait a minute. My computer just knocked me out. I'm sorry, what is it again? 707 of 07?
Yes.
I don't know that we have any further date for anything. Let me pull your file. Hold on a sec.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, now what was it? I have your file here. I don't see any further date. You said you're done with everything you were supposed to do?
Right.
Okay.
Oh, I'd like to get
what was it that you were supposed to do?
remove construction. Abatement of illegal construction.
Okay, and I guess you were in jail also?
Yes, I was.
So I don't think there's anything else that needs to be done.
Well, I'd like to have the case closed.
The case is closed.
When did that happen? I haven't got no notice of it. And I see on the website it said there was a conference held December 9th, and I wasn't there.
No, it was calendar controlled.
Okay.
Let me just see what, hold on a sec.
Okay.
If you're holding, yeah, apparently somebody just calendar controlled it for whatever reason. I was out for 2 months and they just calendar controlled it, maybe to make sure that you were done with your sentence or whatever. I'm not sure, but your case is closed.
I was out of jail December 2nd, and
well, the case actually was closed prior to that. It got brought in at what we call post-dispo after it had been disposed before, and then it got brought in, I guess, for the contempt.
Right.
So now that you've served your sentence, everything is over with, and I will just close out that 1290. You shouldn't even be hanging out there.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was the day I went to court before the judge gave the order. She told you to come in and get a permit. You went and they were correct. Yeah. And we sat down and we went through this list. And 10 of them we crossed right out. Right. Right at this table there. We went right through it, you and I said, do you want to change it from the 2 to the 1? And you said, you were just doing it temporary and you were going to, so we crossed it right off. I went through this list with you before. So the judge gave an order based on all this stuff. Nobody ever contacted, and it was 2 or 3 weeks later. Larry dismissed the original stuff by Joe Rogan. So then you must have had some years that Larry dismissed those. So where's the problem? I don't understand. Well, you could have dismissed this stuff. I'm not dismissing stuff that I'm not involved with. You just told me you dismissed it with Glenn Zeno. I did right here with you. You never did. We went over it. It's in writing. You have a copy of it. We sat here and went through the list, and every one of them was addressed. Number 1, the question and the answer. Number 2, the question and the answer. Number 3, we went through this. You have it in writing. I know you have a copy of it. Yeah. Okay? We went through this whole list, every single one of them. And it all came down to roof with no permit between me and you. And that's the whole thing with me and you. This other stuff here, we went through it. It's in writing that I dismissed. One of the things was about an inspection of your house, and you said it lasted all of 12 minutes. And my rebuttal was, yeah, but it lasted 12 minutes because I already had done all of them with you right at the table. Well, you didn't look at it. And I didn't have to. I already dismissed them. All right, very good. I'll see you later. Okay.
of something from me here.
Well, this is on this year, we need a fee of $35, okay, which is, we had waived the 50, and you have permit fee is 10, the CO fee is 25.
Well, you waived the 50.
Yeah.
That was for the original route permit.
The original application.
I got a receipt that says permit.
Well,
and I'd like to know why you don't.
because there was never a permit issued.
Why is the receipt not here?
Mr. Flood, I'm not here to argue.
I'm not going to argue either. I'm just stating the facts. Okay. We've already crossed out converting the...
Yeah, you're here for right here. Your permit that you signed. Bear with me.
I want to know what I need for permits to go further on the inside of the house.
Okay, you're going to need permits when you do the heating system.
Want to put a furnace in. Right.
Okay. You're going to need for plumbing.
Well, I'm not going to do the plumbing. A plumber's going to come in here. He's going to argue that fact with you.
Okay.
Okay. The beam downstairs.
That you took out, right?
It's going to go back in.
Okay. So it's a structure. It's when you took it out. When you're actually doing structural work when you replace that beam downstairs. If you replace it.
I didn't replace it.
Supported it.
I supported it.
Take that beam out. Bear with me. I didn't tell you to take that beam out.
Yes, you did.
Me?
It says that it was illegal and it had to be removed. Your own law says that it only comes into play when you're removing structure. Because if I tore down that wall and it's a load-bearing wall, then I have to, you understand this, I have to correct that and make that structure sound one way or another, with a header or whatever. Throwing extra support underneath is not the same thing. It's just extra support. If it wasn't there, I'm just adding to it.
Okay.
So, is that a violation? Okay. Simple as that.
It's taken off the list, right?
Well, there's another thing. I mean, you've got a memo that says, I don't have it with me, but your memo says you dismissed most of it. And my case tells me that I've complied with it. I didn't take anything out of there but that beam and the plumbing for the heat.
I didn't tell you to take anything out. We crossed those off here with Colette Zito, sitting right here at this table. 2 years ago or whatever it was.
I know that.
I'm on your side, Mr. Flood. I don't know what you've been...
Well, you weren't on my side when you testified for me to go to jail.
No, I never said that you didn't need a building permit.
Your permit.
You can take up and get the court records of what I said right there in that chair.
Those court records don't mean shit to me. Well, another thing is this application here, it says replace and repair. In your building code, repair and replace is exempt from a building permit.
This is not good yet. Now, you're going to have to either take this up with Ian or whatever, because all I was told that you're coming in, you're going to give me $35. You already signed the permit.
I signed something that doesn't exist.
You signed an application for a building permit.
I signed an application for replace roof shingles only.
Okay.
And you don't need a permit for shingles.
I'm not here to argue with this. Okay.
Well, that's all you've been doing.
I didn't argue with you.
And what's going on with David Carollas? Never said a word about that.
Mr. Corolla has a building permit. I don't know where you get the idea that Mr.
I got a letter from him that he wasn't going to have one after May 3rd.
His was extended. He was told that if he continued to visually work on it, that it was extended. And the minute you stopped work on it, he was notified and he came in and he extended his permit.
No.
Okay.
He came and extended his permit the minute I put that video up on YouTube that I didn't do a damn thing. I didn't get no permits for the porch.
He had a permit.
He didn't have a porch permit. He didn't have any permits for anything structural.
You can bring this up, will you?
Okay. Good morning, Carl. How are you?
How are you?
Just fine, thank you. You left that for me the other day?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Well, after you gave me that one, this one you gave me, and you dismissed the point.
No, hold on. One breath you ask what requires a permit, and the other breath is something that's in your house. You got two different things here.
Okay.
Okay? One is you ask what requires a permit in Paul. So when the question is plumbing work, yes. When we were talking about your house and you had that one bathroom and you showed me, which I agree, was there. It was there, whatever. We dismissed something. That doesn't mean I'm dismissing that plumbing in the village needs a permit.
All right. You know what? Just tell me what do I want? What do you want? As Billy, forget that list. You didn't make that list. Forget that list. What do you want for a building permit to finish the inside of my house?
I want electrical inspection.
Electrical. Well, I'm going to have to get that. I can't get a CO without it.
You just asked me what I need.
That's all you need. That's all you need. You know?
Basically, on your inside, you need electrical inspection. I'm gonna get an inspection from electrical inspector that inspected the work, and he sends one to me.
Well, they already had that here for the outside when they called that a violation.
Well, you're asking me what you need.
Okay, that's all I need. Thank you.
Unless you're doing, I'm just mentioning maintenance, but you're not. You're doing walls, you're doing it.
Put it back to where it was, Carl.
And I explained to you the one day, what I was trying to explain to you. Bear with me a second here. Insulation requires a permit.
Right.
Okay. Now here's what you gotta listen. In an existing building, insulation has to meet what was there or exceed.
Right.
If you have nothing in your walls, that means that you can put the walls back up with nothing in there.
Right.
So why would I make you get a permit?
A couple questions for you.
Not on tape.
What do you mean not on tape? What do you got to hide?
Not working yet.
What's that?
So I'm not working yet.
So when can we make an appointment to talk?
9 o'clock this morning.
9 o'clock this
Yeah.
morning. You want to tell me why you testified for me to go to jail when you knew this
Mr.
was all
Flood,
bullshit?
you just asked me if you would make an appointment with me. I said 9 o'clock this morning.
I'm just asking you a question. Why you
No
want to talk
answer.
about it? You dismissed everything and then you still testified for me to go to jail, Carl. Why'd you do that? I got more cases you can send to sit at saying there was nothing wrong with my house and then you testified for me to go to jail. Thanks, Carl. I'll be back, and when I come back, I'll tell you how I'm doing with these complaints, who's gotten back to me, and what they've said.